your journey from a structural engineer to a data scientist and now an AI product lead at Nvidia is quite remarkable. So, what motivated you to make these career transitions?
One, just because of all the degrees I personally did. Two, my father was a civil engineer, so it's a field and an industry that I had deep insight into.
How did you navigate the challenges associated with such significant shifts?
There's two things here. One is like the knowledge, and then two is like what's kind of on your resume and how that worked.
What was the most challenging decision you had to make during your career transitions, and what factors did you consider in making that decision?
I think the most challenging was probably
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the episode 2 of our series. Today, we have here Subhan Ali, who is the AI product lead at Nvidia. Subhan has a remarkable career profile, moving from a structural engineer to a data scientist, and now to an AI product lead at Nvidia. I'm really excited to talk to Subhan, learn from his experiences, and to get some cool advices. And with that said, I will let Subhan give a brief introduction about himself and his past experiences before we move on to the questions.
great. Thank you so much, Kishbu. I really appreciate being here and being able to chat with you to better tell my story. My name is Subhan. I have worked in the field of artificial intelligence, data science, and machine learning for roughly the last 9 years. Before getting into the field, I actually earned multiple degrees, all in civil engineering and specifically in structural engineering. So my actual academic training did not completely map to what I do now. And I made the choice to get into data science and machine learning immediately after finishing graduate school. And I ultimately did a program called Insight that helped people with PhDs become data scientists. I then went and worked at Symantec as a data scientist and business intelligence person. And then I was at eBay as a product manager, and I've been at Nvidia for the last 5 years, where I've done things that span product management, partnerships, and business development.
Sounds great, Subhan. Thanks for the introduction. So I'll quickly move on to our questions. Um, so your journey from a structural engineer to a data scientist and now an AI product lead at Nvidia is quite remarkable. So what motivated you to make these career transitions?
Yeah, I think with civil engineering, it's a field that I know quite a bit about. One, just because of all the degrees I personally did. Two, my father was a civil engineer, so it's a field and an industry that I had deep insight into. And I worked actually as a structural engineer between undergrad and graduate school. I would say I liked the work, but to me, it didn't feel like the challenges were all that different day to day or over time. And I wanted something that the work itself would kind of change and evolve and push you to grow. And so I just kind of wasn't finding that. And then ultimately, I went to graduate school intending to just get a master's degree. Turned out that this is 2008. Not long after starting in school, the economy and job market got really hard in a very quick amount of time. And I realized that the job market was dramatically harder actually at that time than it had been even 2 years before, which with just a bachelor's degree for me. So I had that unique opportunity to get a PhD from Stanford, which was never really a part of my plan. But it turned out that that was a viable path, and I pursued it. And I definitely learned and grew a lot in graduate school. And then ultimately, after finishing, there were kind of three different paths that I could go down. Um, One was to go back to civil engineering. Two was to go into like consulting, so this would be like strategy or management consulting. And then three was to get into the tech industry. And in the tech industry, my ideal place was to end up in product management or business development. Um, and so I kind of tried to go about that path. Um, a mentor of mine who is a venture capitalist gave me some advice that he just said that, hey, you know, you have a PhD in a very technical field, getting into business development or product management straight out of the PhD, it's kind of a bit of a hard thing to make happen. But he said that, hey, given your background, given how you think, given where the demand is, data science is a really interesting area. And those are people who are really deep in the numbers and behind the companies and understand the business. And so I could see that working out for you. And he was right. And ultimately, I uh, ended up doing this program called Insight that took people with PhDs and helped them become data scientists. And that really helped me make that transition. And then ultimately, I was able to get the roles that I've had.
Okay, sounds great. So I think the next question would be a continuation of that. How did you navigate the challenges associated with such significant shifts?
Yeah, I think I think that there there's two things here. One is like the knowledge, and then two is like what's kind of on your resume and what how that works. I think that with the knowledge, so for me, like I didn't have a background in computer science. And so I had to learn a lot of things on my own. And I think for me personally, what does that mean? That means that there's an online learning platform called Udemy. They have a lot of online courses, Python, R, SQL, data science, machine learning, all these sorts of things. I took a lot of those courses and I learned a lot of these things on my own. And also talked to other people who had done something similar to what I was hoping to do. So people that had gone to graduate school with me and had actually gotten into data science from either the field that I was in or in other fields that were adjacent. So just understanding how they went about it. So I think that was one big part of it. The other big part of it is, for better or for worse, the single biggest thing that people look at when they evaluate you for a job by far is the most recent thing on your resume. And so in my case, the most recent thing on my resume was a PhD in civil engineering from Stanford. And that was, so immediately the first question that I always got was, well, you have a background in civil engineering. Why do you want to be a data scientist? That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I was like, well, I need to fix this somehow. I need to make it so that the most recent thing on my experience is actually aligns to what I want to do. And that's where Insight came in, which is it helped me build a portfolio and add really that line on my resume that meant that first conversation was a lot more natural and coherent and just made sense. So I think ultimately you have to look at what are the gaps that you have across the board, and then what are you doing to address those gaps? Because I think the worst thing you can do is kind of just get into it without even realizing the gaps are there. And then things don't click and you're wondering, well, what am I doing wrong? And that takes a lot of hard work and a lot of looking yourself in the mirror and making sure that, you know what, this, I'm great here, I'm not great here. I mean, very objective and neutral about it.
Got it. So you mentioned about the insights thing. Is it kind of like a program, or it's like an institution that kind of helps you, learn whatever skills you need to be a data scientist?
Yeah, it's like a data science boot camp.
Okay,
There are a number of these that exist now. Unfortunately, Insight is not around anymore. Like Data Incubator and Metis, and there's
Kaggle.
there's other
Yeah.
ones that exist. So yes, that's exactly what Insight is.
Okay, got it. So my next question to you would be, switching fields, especially from structural engineering to data science, involves acquiring new skills. How did you identify the skills you needed to develop? Okay, I think this kind of completes the question, the answer that you just gave. So I'm just going to move on to the next one.
Sure.
Many people feel imposter syndrome when transitioning to a new field. Did you experience this during your career transitions? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yes, I think so. I think imposter syndrome. I mean, I would say I first felt it in graduate school. Um, because when you have a PhD or when you're trying to get a PhD and then you're dealing with people who are academics, I think it's probably the most extreme form of imposter syndrome, at least personally that I have experienced. But it equally applies to any technical field that's really out there. I mean, I think at the end of the day, um, I think that if you exhibit a genuine and unique interest in what it is that you're trying to do, and you show a willingness to go and put depth and effort and work into what you're doing, that kind of ultimately trumps and wins over everything. And so if you can do that, and your drive and your motivation is authentic, um, I think sooner or later you'll win. Um, but you just got to be able to and willing to put that in, and then ultimately to know your stuff so much that you build the confidence that you have in order and need in order to project that you know what you're talking about. So that kind of never ends, like, because at the end of the day, technology and these fields change so much so quickly. But you always want to put yourself in the best position so that whatever the new thing is, the latest thing is, you're on top of it. A lot of people didn't know what large language models were. I mean, it's September, yeah, 2 years ago, September 2022. Most people did not know what they were. Um, and now everybody knows what they are, right? And so what does that mean? That means that when the tide changes, you have to be able to put the cycles and the time in and do the things that other people, may not be able or willing to do in order to get a competitive edge. And if you do that, if you can take advantage of changes that are happening, those are actually really the best ways, because when changes happen very quickly, that means that there aren't a lot of people that have expertise in the new area. So the sooner that you can establish yourself as a person with expertise in that new area, as that new area begins to grow, the more uh, knowledgeable and the more in a stronger position that you're going to be.
Yeah, that's great advice, Subhan. I really, really like that. And I agree with you. Like no matter where you transition into, you'll always have the self-doubt. And it requires a lot of courage and determination. So yeah, great job on that. Seriously. Um, okay. So the next question that I have is like, what was the most challenging decision you had to make during your career transitions, and what factors did you consider in making that decision?
I think the most challenging was probably, I mean, switching industries from civil engineering to AI and machine learning. I mean, I think that was pretty hard, because I think switching industries is there's like switching roles, which generally happens within an industry, but then there's switching industries, which is generally the hardest thing to pull off. Um, so I think that is a pretty hard one, and that just comes down to putting the cycles and the time in, to really know and understand the area that you're going into, and then like I said, doing the other work, the knowledge, the resume building that maps to where you want to go. I think that's a big one. I think the other big one for me personally was kind of that gap between my role before Nvidia and my role at Nvidia. That was a period of like soul searching for me, trying to figure out where, what roles kind of mapped what I really wanted to do, and how to have alignment between myself and what I did professionally, and then also another element of what I call intrinsic motivation, or being a person who has high agency, because I did not feel like I had those things before joining NVIDIA. So I think if you can build those, it's just a huge competitive advantage, that it's kind of unmistakable. Like you know it when you see it, and you know when you don't have it, but when you have it, it really is a game changer.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that one. Um, so the next question I have is for you is that as an AI product lead, how do you blend technical expertise with product management skills to drive success? Or what does a day in your role looks like?
Yeah. So as an AI product lead, like so the way I would think about this is, um, I view myself as an outcome or objective driven person. And I am more or less willing to do anything and everything that it takes in order to achieve those outcomes or objectives. So what does that mean for me tactically? Well, it means that I find myself kind of working across the whole spectrum of what's involved and what I need to do. So that includes product, that includes engineering, which are both technical areas, but it actually also includes sales and marketing to some degree as well. Um, but on the product engineering part, I'd say that, you know, I what do I do? I embed NVIDIA technology inside other companies' technical stacks so that their end customers can fully leverage NVIDIA technology where they want to. That's really what I do. And there's a few parts to that, which is like one, I have to be able to understand Nvidia's technology stack really well, which is not easy to do because it's pretty complicated. And then so that there's that part of it. But then two, I have to be able to understand the target environment's technical stack. And I have to be able to speak to product managers and engineers, usually at a different company, to help them understand how to leverage NVIDIA technology in their environment. So ultimately, like it's really about being able to show depth, to show familiarity and understanding with things that, and put yourself in somebody else's shoes so that you can speak with real credibility, authenticity, and act in their best interest. Because ultimately, the magic happens when you create alignment in that what you want and what the other party wants are the same thing. And if you can do that repeatedly, that's going to lead to pretty good outcomes, actually. Um, there may have been a second part of your question that I may not have answered, but I think that was most of it.
No, I think you covered most of it that I was looking for. Yeah, it was majorly like how does a day look like in your role? But yeah, that kind of covers everything that you just mentioned. Now my next question for you is like for those looking to pivot into data science or AI from a non-traditional background, what advice would you offer? What steps should they take to prepare for such a transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that you can learn, the better. So I think there's two things that I recommend doing. I think one, I mean, knowledge is pretty accessible now, generally. So if you
Right.
can, uh, you know, throughout the internet. I mean, I use Udemy, which is still a great resource. But you can also leverage LLMs and stuff to help you learn these things quicker. There are a number of videos on YouTube that I've seen that talk about how to use ChatGPT in order to learn Python in a much faster way than you probably able to do otherwise. So I think really being able to leverage any existing resource that's kind of out there is really critical. And then the other thing I'd recommend is to network and to learn from other people who have done what you're trying to do. The more that you can do that, the better. And so if you can identify people who are who either have a similar background to yourself, but maybe are 5 years into the future where you want to be, like that's really an ideal way to go about it. Um, but I'd say at the end of the day, like something to always keep in mind is like the power of building relationships. And the more that you can build relationships with other people, authentic relationships with other people, the better that's going to pay off dividends for you in some way, shape, or form that may not be clear to you right now. So I'd really recommend that, and I'd say, and then the last thing I'd say is obviously everybody uses LinkedIn, but I mean, you want to, tailor and create an online brand that matches where you're trying to go. So what does that mean? That means that listing the courses that you took on Udemy, which I did certainly myself on your LinkedIn. If you can, I did Insight. Obviously, I listed that on my resume. And then the other thing I even recommend doing is creating content on social media platforms that map to where it is you're trying to go. Because oftentimes you'll find that if you can do that really well, and build a brand that people identify with, that's just going to be extremely valuable and ultimately open doors by itself.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I see a lot of content creator, sharing a lot of those information. Um, and my next question to you is like each of these roles, structural engineer, data scientist, and AI product lead requires a different mindset. How did you adapt your thinking and approach to succeed in each of these fields?
Yeah, I'd say I'd say like I mean, there's certain knowledge that is specific to each of those areas. So, I mean, being a structural engineer, like what did I have to know? I had to know how to design steel and concrete. Like bluntly, that's what it was. And there were tools that were involved there, but that's kind of what I had to know. Um, and and then as a data scientist, what were the skills that I had to know? I had to know Python, R, SQL, things along those lines. And then being doing product now, it's less, I'd say, deeply technical kind of work, but much more um, uh, influencing, relationship building, project planning, technical integration. I mean, I think at the end of the day, personally, I always approach it from the standpoint of, start with the endpoint and then work backwards and figure out what you need to do in order to get to what you're trying to go. So I know what the outcome is, I know what I want to do, and then I try to find a way to do that. But I think, like, to your real question, um, I'd say that in all of the roles that I've had, there's like a very deep element of problem solving present throughout all of them, actually. And I think if you are able to hone and refine your ability to solve problems, regardless of what role you're doing, and you transfer that skill to another field, like, you just have a leg up. And so I'd say, like, there are people who like, being a structural engineer, it's highly analytical. Like, it really was. It was a lot of matrix multiplication, math, stuff like that. Uh, and but being able to take that analytical thinking and skill set and apply it to um, data, being able to apply it to organizations, to product management, to all these sorts of things. That's really valuable. So I really recommend being able to keep an open, flexible mind, and then taking whatever it is you learn in one area and then using that as a basis to build in something else.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I just have a last question, and that kind of summarizes, I think that kind of would summarize everything that we've talked about so far. So you've completed your PhD and MS in civil engineering, but chose to pursue a career as a data scientist afterward, which is quite unconventional since many with your background usually continue to research or related fields.
Mhm.
So how did you manage to secure interview opportunities for data scientist roles? How did you convince the recruiters that you are a strong candidate for the role despite having a completely different academic background?
Um, yeah, I mean, I didn't actually do any internships in data science before I got a full-time role. But ultimately, like, I'd say there's two parts to that. So what I got out of Insight was a few things. I think one was, um, obviously, the thing on my resume, I think that was, for what it's worth, it was valuable. But two other parts to it that helped me. One was during Insight, I did a data science project with an actual company, and help them deploy a machine learning model into production. So that was like an actual real, like, use case, like, that was, I think, very valuable. And then the other thing was, like, really honing the ability to interview. I mean, interviewing is the art generally of walking into a room with someone you've never met before and then walking out with an impression that you're the person to do the job. And, like, that's a skill. Skills can be developed. And so I think, and you develop it by practice and repetition. So the more that you practice and do mock interviews and stuff like that, the better you're going to get at it. And ultimately, like, that's kind of the way that I would think about it.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. And I believe that you still have like self-learning, since you mentioned that you still do a lot of, courses, and then I see you posted out there on LinkedIn. So you're still continuing on the self-learning path, even though you've become a product lead right now. Is that how it works? I mean, is that how it is right now?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I like I said before, um, yeah, I mean, large language models took off relatively recently, and I think it would be a mistake not to try to understand and know how to fully leverage those as much as possible. So I think that at the end of the day, like, the most valuable thing that you get out of your schooling is not the actual knowledge they teach you; it's the ability of how to learn. And so you always want to keep a flexible, agile mind, and be able to learn something new that you haven't known before. And that process kind of never ends. If you feel like it ends, that's probably not a good thing. So I think you should always be putting yourself in a position where things seem difficult, because if things don't seem difficult, then that probably means you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Subhan. This is so helpful, and so enlightening, actually. I think I've learned so much talking to you. I'm sure the folks watching this is gonna get a lot from this. And is there anything that you want to say before, like, we go to, like, just end it?
No, I think that, if you're thinking about a career change, like, I'd say this, it's never easy. It's always hard. And, people even for myself, look at my, my profile and I'm like, oh, it's just kind of all lined up. And that's actually it's never really that straightforward. It's actually always pretty difficult. And so I'd say that if you're thinking about it, you should probably just go ahead and do it. Understanding it's going to take time and understanding that it's going to be a harder path to go down. However, if you do it right, you'll end up in a significantly better situation than you would have been otherwise. For me personally, I like, I joined Nvidia 5 years ago, not fully realizing kind of where the company was going and what was going to happen. But amazing things happen when you put the work in and you work with incredible people. So I think that at the end of the day, like if I think the biggest mistake I probably could have ever made was just staying in civil engineering and looking back here 9 years later, like, oh, I'm still here, and the work doesn't feel all that different. So I'd say just put the cycles in, put the time in, and if you want to make something happen, the sooner you start working towards it, the sooner it's going to happen.
Got it. Thank you so much, Subhan. I really, really appreciate it for everything that you've spoken about, sharing your experiences with us. And I specifically want to thank, because I know you've just come out from your paternity leave, and then you still made time to join this call. I'm so thankful to you for that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Chris. We appreciate
Thank
this.
you. Talk to you soon. Bye.